quick and just some introductions. Everybody knows who's on the call and where you're what you're representing. My name is Rista Malanka. I'm one of the two co-chairs of this committee. I am work for the City of Torrington and the Economic Development Director. Let's see, we can go on. Jack, you want to go next?
Okay, Jack Walsh, co-chair with Rista, and I'm with the NVCOG Advisory Committee, obviously, and also the Waterbury Greenway.
I'm just going to go around my screen here. Aaron.
Aaron Budris, I'm a regional planner at the Naugatuck+Valley Council of Governments.
Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine. I'm an environmental planner with the Naugatuck+Valley Council of Governments.
Mark.
Yeah, good morning, Mark Nielsen, Assistant Director, NVCOG.
Anna.
Good morning, Anna Bergeron with DOT. I'm the bike ped coordinator for the state.
Paul Grimmer.
Paul Grimmer from Shelton Economic Development Corporation.
Waterbury, City of Waterbury.
Hi, good morning. It's Judy Mancini, advisor to Mayor Neil O'Leary from Waterbury.
Great.
And Sal Porzio, City of Waterbury, DPW.
Hey, Sal, thanks. Rob Phillips.
Morning, everybody. Rob Phillips, Executive Director at NHCOG.
All right. Paul Bunovich. Skip over him if he comes back. Stacy Sefchuk.
Stacy Sefchuk, Land Use Administrator for the town of Thomaston.
Cleve. I see you, Cleve, but I can't hear you.
Oh,
There he is.
Well, Cleve is from Litchfield. All right, James Stewart.
Public Works, Naugatuck.
I'm
Hi,
gonna put you.
it's Paul from Watertown. I didn't have my computer thing hooked up, so I'm at least audio here.
It's all right. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Ciriello. Did I mess? I totally butchered that.
Pretty close. It's Tony Ciriello, advisory to the town of Watertown. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have somebody calling in on 945-5240.
That's me, Paul Benevich.
Oh, perfect. And Vincent Seifert.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I just logged on. It's Vince Seifert. I'm with the Naugatuck Steering Committee.
Great. Well, welcome to our February meeting. I hope everybody has been doing well and staying warm. I'll jump right into the agenda here. The first thing we want to discuss is the Naugatuck River Greenway operations management and maintenance. And I really want this to be very much a roundtable discussion and hear from you as to what are your best management practices that you're doing. What are some things that you've seen that you really like? What are some things you don't like? And kind of have this discussion. I know Aaron will get into it a little bit here, but I think that it's important in the whole purpose of this committee is as we continue to grow our sections of trails to really think of it as a contiguous trail and what is the experience for the users. Several years back, we did a branding study and created consistent branding so the user would have that experience the whole way through. And then this is just some more kind of that next step as to what could those uses be and how can they be maintained the same same uses. So if somebody's traveling the whole 44 miles, they get that same experience. This is, up to each town to adopt and do for their own, but to have a starting point and some guidance as to where everybody's going to go is the purpose of this. So we really want it to be driven from the towns and to hear your experience before we even put something forward. So I'm going to turn this over to Aaron to kind of go through this, and I'm sure he'll go in a little more detail than I just did. But then I'll open it up to some discussion. So start thinking about things that you've liked and would like to see in a document like this.
Thanks, Rista. So yeah, how this sort of started is about a month and a half ago, Waterbury reached out to us and asked about sort of rules and regulations and how other trails are handling certain things. And instead of just sort of giving them our recommendations, I really thought it would be worthwhile to bring it to this group, really get everybody's input. And like Rista said, as more and more trail gets built out, I think we need to start thinking about this as one trail, and sort of try to coordinate some of these things between towns. So we started drafting a document, operation management and maintenance guide. So this is not a plan. This is really just more best practices and issues that need to be considered, so that towns have that information when they start making those decisions. So I'll go through this, I'll sort of give you the high points and sort of the issues, sort of the big issues that people are encountering on trails like this across the country. And then, really want to hear from you all about what your thoughts are and your experiences. So we broke the guide down into 3 main sections. One is design and amenity considerations. So what to think about when you're, building a trail, and the maintenance issues that, as Rista and I were just talking, a lot of funders do not want to fund maintenance. So, towns really have to have a good maintenance plan ahead of constructing one of these things. So, what do they need to consider about that? And then rules and regulations and enforcement of those rules. So, I'll go through each of these 3, and at the end, we actually have some draft rules and regs that we can talk about too. So the design and amenity considerations, we went into a lot about trail surface. I think most towns along the Naugatuck River Greenway are considering paved trail. There are some sections that compact stone dust might make sense. Both of those can be made ADA compliant, so that's not necessarily an issue, but there are maintenance issues with both of those that need to be considered. Talked about all the design standards that are out there. The American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, AASHTO, publishes a guide for development of bike and ped facilities that covers multi-use trails and really anything you would need to know about design on one of those facilities. NACTO is I can't remember their National Association of City Transportation Officials. They have a design guide for on-street bike facilities. And then, when towns are building these trails, they need to think about amenities as well. So the 3 Bs we talked about in our economic study is what people really want. The 3 Bs: bathrooms, benches, bike racks. I know bathrooms present a serious maintenance issue and potential safety issue in some towns, but they really are an amenity that people want on trails. And I can tell you, I travel around the state downloading data from counters for the Connecticut Trail Census every couple months, and I plan my trip around what places have bathrooms. I drink a lot of coffee, so I understand how important it could be to get to a trail and have that option available. And then also wayfinding and signage. So as Rista mentioned, we developed a wayfinding and design manual a few years ago. So don't forget that we have that, and please reach out to us when you are developing these things. So, I'll open it up to everybody else's input at this point on design and amenities, and what your experiences are and what you think about that.
Well, I can tell you about bathrooms. When we opened our trail, that was the number one requested thing because there were no bathrooms on, and it was several years in before they put one in. And then the issue becomes, where do you put it and how do you maintain it? And ours had to be moved a couple of times, and the final location is about halfway through. And it's maintained not by the city. It's we have a private contractor that brings in the portable toilets, and that seems to work pretty well. No real problems with it, but it is a major consideration. As I said, it was the number one requested amenity from the day we opened.
And I'll just say, add to that conversation, bathrooms don't necessarily need to be municipal bathrooms. There may be businesses along the trails that will open up their bathrooms to trail users because it draws people into their restaurant or their store. So that, that might be a conversation that you have with local businesses that are close by or nearby, and maybe it's some signage. It can be the portable bathrooms like Jack was talking about. And here in Torrington, we've recently started having this conversation about placing actual bathrooms, structures, buildings with plumbing in a few key locations. And how do we want to manage that? Do we want to open year round? How do we lock it at night? What kind of systems do we use? So because we really are seeing a need for that as our trails get more popular, but also as we're trying to encourage more people to come down and not be so car dependent, but walking and parking their car. We need to know that that's something we need to do or provide. So from that bathroom standpoint, I think when we talk about benches and other amenities, looking at CPTED practices, which is crime prevention through economic or environmental design, the way you're facing your benches and where they are so they're safe, and I encourage people to sit there, and what people want to look at are things that we can talk about. And I do think that with the Naugatuck River Greenway, ADA compliance is something we should strive for. I know not all trails must meet ADA compliance, but a trail of this length and the users that we have on here, I do think meeting that is important. And we do try to strive for that here in Torrington.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add about the issue with bathrooms, that short section in Watertown by the bus garage maintenance facility, that was put, there was bathrooms put in there. And I'm not sure, Anna, do you know if the state maintains that or is the town maintaining that? Paul, maybe you know too. I was just curious what the experience has been with that, even though it probably doesn't get a lot of use, but it is something that has been put in place.
I'm sorry, where's the location again? Did you say Cheshire?
For the CT Transit bus garage right there at the end of, what is that, Route 262, Aaron?
Yeah, Echo Lake Road.
I do not. Would it be the town then?
Well, that's the question, because the state built it as part of when they built the maintenance facility, and
it could be.
I don't know whether that they transferred maintenance responsibilities over to the town already, or whether it's still being sort of maintained by the state.
I do not know. For
hey,
sure.
Mark, this is Roy Kavanaugh. Can I weigh in?
Sure, you're right. How you doing?
Yeah, the town is responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that bathroom facility at this time.
And I guess the question is, what's been the town's experience in maintaining that? And like I said, yeah, I know it probably doesn't get a whole lot of use, but it's a composting facility. So, you know, they don't have the plumbing hooked up to it, but I'm sure it still needs to be cleaned out occasionally.
Right, it's composting facility, and I think I don't know about this winter, but last winter was shut down.
Right. But again, as you know, towns are thinking about the need for those kinds of facilities, I think, you know, the experiences of that one in Watertown would be a good example or something to check out as you're beginning to think about it.
Mark, this Sal Porzio from Waterbury. We are actually putting in a prefab restroom structure along the trail, but we also have it's also at the intersection of basically South Main and Platts Mill Road, where we're also building a park. And our mayor has instituted a program. He wants restrooms in all the parks. So this is a standard prefab structure. We're putting it, and we are doing it. We are tying it into the utilities. I had done some research because we had that debate, what type of bathroom. We definitely wanted a bathroom. And the people I spoke to, I think it was in the Farmington River, I'd have to look at my notes, but their preference was if you could connect it to existing plumbing, that was the way to go versus a composting unit.
Okay.
That just general, and that what was one of the big factors in why we went with the hard plumbed structure.
I'm guessing you might have talked to the folks in Cheshire, Sal, who have.
Cheshire and along, I'm not sure, somewhere along the Farmington Trail. I'd have to go. I mean, that was maybe even 2 years ago. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up.
Cheshire recently, there's two. So they have composting toilets at the Jarvis Street trailhead on the Farmington Canal Trail, and they have regular plumbed toilets near West Main Street. So, you know, I think
they've even predated Cheshire's. So it was, I mean, our trail's been, 10, 12 years in the making.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of that will be dependent on where there's that sewer capability to tie in. You know, it's easier in some of the cities where if it's a more rural area without the sewer there, you have to go with the other routes. How about some other towns? What's your experience with design or, amenities that you've seen along the bathrooms? Anybody have any demand for like bike maintenance facilities or air for tires or parking issues? Anything like that we can talk about?
I'll just say, I've seen a lot of trails installing bike repair sort of centers with a bike pump and a set of tools. And I'm a newish cyclist, and it saved me more than once. Where I had a flat, or I needed a tool that I didn't have with me, and I think it's a really great idea. They're relatively inexpensive too.
Anna, are you still here?
Yep, I'm here.
I have a question for you on the wayfinding signage. I know that a couple of years ago, DOT was pretty adamant that greenways and trails were not part of highway signage or in the state right of way. Is that still kind of DOT's perspective on that, even for more major trails like the NRG or the East Coast Greenway, or has that thinking kind of changed a bit?
I do not know for sure. I know there's been some pushback in the past about installing too many signs, especially right off the highway and right off where the exits ramps are, not to overcrowd the roads with signage. But I can check into that for you guys.
Yeah, that would be great. And, I'm thinking, not, and this is kind of, statewide, my thought is, not every trail should have, permission to put signs either on the big highway signs or in the state right of way, because maybe not every trail demands that. But if it's a state designated greenway or a multi-town, that really becomes a destination for people. Having that signage really does help direct people where to go and how to get to those key trailheads.
Well,
So if,
yeah, for example, I mean, it's a district and encroachment permit request from the district to install the wayfinding signs.
yeah,
So I don't think it's a big deal as far as getting approval. It's just the locations will need to get, you will need to come up with specific locations. The signage would have to get done on your own cost.
Yep.
And installed by the group. Like DOT isn't going to make the signs and install them, but they will give encroachment permit authority for them to be installed in the state's right away.
Aaron, has that been your experience with that?
So when we actually got a Rec Trails grant to purchase signs, and we designed some wayfinding signs, and we tried to go through the districts, or the district. They sent us to Newington, and we were basically told that they wouldn't allow that type of signage, and they directed us to the I guess the tourism program. So
okay. So they shut you down.
Yeah, the signs that you see for museums and state parks and things like that are on the highway. So we sort of went a different route with it, with the signs that we purchased, and basically got signs to put on the trails. So that was I don't know that it was ever really resolved. It was sort of a time sensitive thing that we sort of gave up at the time, I guess.
But you did have to purchase your own signs,
Yes.
right? And then if they approved, you would have to install them yourself.
I'm not sure. Yes, right. That's how.
Okay. And you never did move on with the installation of them because you never got the approval from DOT.
Correct. We were told we couldn't install them within the state right away.
Yep.
In one of the locations that we thought made sense is some of these trails are fairly close to interchanges with Route 8.
Right.
It would be good to have something at the bottom of the ramp that would point somebody to the
with like an
trailhead.
arrow pointing them where to turn for the trail. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, we even went to the state's bike and ped advisory board and try to enlist their support. Yeah, and they tried to push and again, even they were sort of there's too much pushback.
If I can add from in Waterbury, we actually don't really have a provision for what I would call the wayfinding signs, which would be the brown signs, like you said, off the exit, directing people, vehicles to the location. And our signage is only within the footprint of our project. I believe there are, unfortunately, or interestingly, our project is also within some of the DOT right of way. And where we are putting structures in the right of way, we have to have a maintenance agreement. They will let us put it in, guide rails and some signage, but we have to agree to maintain them and take care of them. We're responsible for what we put in, but we have nothing like Mark mentioned, off the exit, off the highway, directing people. And there was some confusion even in the terminology. What is a wayfinding sign? Is that on the trail? Is it on a road?
Right.
So we just sort of, again, let that go, and we're only focusing within the footprint of the trail.
So the only reason I bring it up is not necessarily to get a concrete answer on this right now, but maybe kind of now that it's not so time sensitive, maybe we can have this conversation with Anna or others at DOT as we develop this document, kind of give some guidance to towns as to what to do and what the state's vision or view on these signs would be, because I do think that there's some valid point to not having over signage, you know, that kind of takes away from all the signs that are there and they don't become effective. So kind of just giving some direction, making sure that we're consistent with DOT's view on this too. So maybe that can be a future conversation as we develop this document.
So Aaron, do you still foresee maybe in the future getting these signs installed if you could?
I mean, I think it would be great. You know, at least to be able to direct people to the trailheads that make sense to direct people to, you know, the places with enough parking, with facilities. You know, I think it would be very helpful.
So why don't we have a offline discussion? I think I recall now hearing about this and the signage. It was a couple years ago, but reach out to me and we can have a phone call and see if we can propose this idea again and see what happens.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, before we move on, anything else?
Yeah, Jim Stewart here. Is it part of this report to provide some standard recommended amenity details? Like, here's the bench that we want to keep consistent or try to keep consistent, fencing, lighting, whatever?
No, I don't think it really, you know, we weren't intending it to get into that much detail. If the towns think it's really helpful, we could. You know, I think, you know, each town is probably going to base their amenities on other things that they have in town that they use in parks. So, you know, I'm sure Naugatuck has sort of a standard bench that you install in all parks.
Oh, we do, but I wouldn't be against seeing what the group, you know, likes, because if you're trying to create a uniform feel and you know, yeah, the signs are nice, but if you know, fences keep changing and benches keep changing and type of brick pavers keep changing, then you know, it might not get what you're trying to get. Certainly, I wouldn't want to be forced to use anything because it might not fit in a certain spot. But anyway, just a thought.
And Jim, I think that might be a good idea, something we can look into. You know, we could do it something similar to what we did with the signage and branding document to come up with some, you know, acceptable design or sizes or whatever you want to call it for, these amenities. So yeah, we'll think about that, and that might be something we can roll into our work program.
Also in Waterbury, we're at the point on our Greenway where we need to actually develop the signage and get it made. So Sal, I don't know if you want to speak to that. How does that happen? I don't know. I've never worked on a Greenway before. So, I mean, how does that all happen? Is there uniform signage?
Julie's referring to what I call the etiquette rules.
Okay.
You know, taken to the extreme, you know, basically, I put together a list because our contractor put in a request for information because he wants to know what the verbiage, because he's responsible for making up the sign. This is part of the sign, something that would be part of the trailhead signage, I would think. Basically, what are the basic, rules of courtesy on the trail? And I put together, if it was Sal's Greenway, here's the list I would want, based on my experience, like Aaron said, traveling around. And that's something we're going to have to do in the very near future. My question, what started to Aaron was, did we have standards? Did the steering committee have a standard?
Yeah, I mean, that manual we put together a few years ago did include standards and some standard dimensions and styling and things like that. So
right, there were and I used that for the dimensions assigned, and that was in our bid specs. It was just the actual verbiage that we were going to use.
Well, I think that's what we're talking about today. I think Aaron in his next couple of slides will start talking about the actual rules, and like you said, the etiquette rules, being considerate and sharing, and you're not the only one on this trail and things like that. So yeah, he has some of that wordage.
Okay.
Coming up.
All right.
Yeah, so maybe we'll move on to the next. So maintenance. So, when we were doing the economic study a few years ago, we talked to a lot of trail managers across the state and talked about maintenance. So a lot of what we learned from that process, we included in this draft. So, the regular maintenance issues are litter removal and trash collection. There's a question about whether or not to include or provide trash receptacles, or, ask people to carry out their trash. That can backfire on you too, but the vegetation control is usually the biggest maintenance issue on most of the trails, although probably not in Derby necessarily because there's no vegetation.
On the island.
Right. Amenity upkeep. So all of those things that you install have to be taken care of, obviously. We came up with an estimate of around $5,000 per mile annually for regular maintenance issues. That doesn't include, replacing fences or, the more long-term things, resurfacing. And that fits pretty closely with some national figures we've been able to find. So it's, between $5,000 and $7,000 a year or something like that.
And what I'd like to just add in terms of regular maintenance, I know a lot of towns, when they're looking at trails like these, start worrying about liability. They want to, try to reduce their exposure as much as possible. And actually having a regular maintenance program reduces that concern, because if you're out there regularly picking up branches that have fallen, filling in potholes, addressing maybe cracks in the surface or drainage washouts or things like that, you've demonstrated that no, you are maintaining it, so it reduces your exposure to liability. So you may look at it and say, oh gee, we got to pay this amount of money each year to maintain these things. But on the other hand, by doing that, you're avoiding the potential of a lawsuit if somebody were to have an accident. So that's something also to keep in mind, especially with the vegetation control. Branches coming down, leaves in the fall, things like that.
And I think that picture he's got also represents one of the main issues. What are you going to do during the winter? Okay,
Right.
you can see what we decided in Derby, but I know early on, some places we're talking about where they allow cross-country skiing when it snows. I think the Derby example shows you when you have a trail like Derby's, cross-country probably wouldn't work anyways because the snow melts so fast, but you still have to clear it. And I joke, but I'm very serious about it. I think they clear the trail in Derby faster than they do the roads.
And we've been tracking use in Derby, and I'll say, across trails in Connecticut, you wouldn't think that, many trails get that much use in the winter, but they all do. And on trails where snow is cleared, like in Derby, those numbers rebound immediately after a storm and are actually higher, because I think in a lot of places, there's no other, unless you're going to go cross country skiing, which most people don't do, trails like this are the only place to safely recreate outside. So, all of those other options, hiking in the woods or even using the school track or whatever are lost in the winter. So having this amenity is a big deal. And also, if we really want this trail to be used for commuting, it really, they should be open year round and in all conditions as much as possible. To allow people to get to work or to get to school or where they need to go.
Should point out that they bought special equipment for clearing snow on the trail to fit on the trail. So there is an additional expense to that as well.
So I do want to hear what some other towns are doing, but I also wanted to mention this idea of a maintenance plan. And, having this document as a guide that maybe each town can take and either adopt as is or or modified to meet their needs. But I know that this year with the Connecticut Rec Trails program, you know, when we review these applications, we want to make sure that if you're constructing trails, you have a plan for maintenance and that you're going to maintain them, because we don't want to pay through grant funds. There's just not enough funding to pay for grant funds through for construction and then continued maintenance. So that maintenance really needs to be on the municipalities, and adopting a maintenance plan will help with other grant funding and kind of give you those extra points you need to score high. So as we go through this and, you know, come up with a general maintenance plan, I think each town should review it and kind of adapt it and modify it to their own so that they have a maintenance plan. Here in Torrington, we have two maintenance plans. One is for our urban trails and one is for our more rural trails. So the urban trails, we're trying to keep open. We have a whole separate set of you know, lighting, benches, kind of amenities that go with it versus what we do with our urban or rural trails. So that's just something to consider as well. But what are other towns doing for maintenance?
May I ask a question while people are thinking about that?
Yep.
Sure. So in Naugatuck, we're considering up to 2 pedestrian bridges. And one of the big concerns we've had about the long-term, you know, cost, trying to maintain the bridge, even if it's a shorter, maybe even if it's a cheaper way to build the trail, in the long run, it might actually cost more due to maintenance. And with a bridge structure, of course, that number could be huge, especially if what usually happens, that they're not inspected. So like, what would other towns, I'm not sure, you know, what other towns are doing for pedestrian bridge inspection and maintenance, but, you know, typically it's a pretty in-depth program. I'm a bridge engineer, and, you know, so I know that the state has to dedicate a lot of money to bridge inspection. I don't think most towns are going to have that kind of, you know, ability to fund inspection. Is there an easy solution?
No, but I think that brings up a very good point about, you know, thinking of different pieces of the trail, whether it's a bridge or a tunnel or something more specific.
It would seem like, you know, the state would be in the best position to assist the towns in at least providing regular inspection, because they have a whole program where they keep track of, you know, when the last inspection was done, and there's all sorts of standards. And it's pretty important because, you know, that's why the Marianas Bridge went down years ago, if you recall, because, you know, lack of inspection. Not saying we're going to have a disaster, you know, of course, of that magnitude, but, you know, just, we're going to put all this money into the bridges. It's a lot cheaper to maintain them than wait for them to fail.
Yeah.
I think the bridge information is actually now available online. So you can check, or anyone can check on the bridge information. Let me look it up and I'll send a link to the meeting.
That's through the state. You're talking the bridge information through the DOT?
Yeah.
So they're keeping records of the pedestrian bridges?
I believe all of that has now become available online for anyone to see. Let me look into it right now and I'll send you.
The state is not inspecting the pedestrian bridges, as far as I know. They've never given us a report or inspected our pedestrian bridge.
If I could weigh in on that, Ben, I think that's an excellent point. The pedestrian bridges aren't assigned a state bridge number, right? So
I don't think so.
So I don't know how they're cataloged, and I'm thinking about all the bridges we've done over the years in other towns like Wallingford, per se. We did a 208-foot bridge a couple of years ago in Wallingford. And prior to that, a 135-foot bridge, and the town of Watertown is about to do its second pedestrian bridge on the Steelbrook Greenway. So I think you raise a very good point. And while that's unrelated to the Naugatuck River Greenway, I'm making a note here for myself on that on behalf of the town of Watertown.
And maybe it depends too how it was funded, state or federal money. They might have something to do with it too.
The bridge that we rehabbed together in Naugatuck with the borough had federal dollars, and the bridges we've done in Wallingford had federal dollars. Cheshire has federal dollars. So that's a very interesting point.
I mean, when Naugatuck and SLR did the bridge in Naugatuck, the feds required or the state and the feds required an inspection, a thorough inspection of that bridge prior to us, fixing it up. But there's been nothing from them since then as far as inspection. I remember a couple of years ago, I spoke to our local representative and brought the point to them. I said, well, maybe you guys could do something to require the state DOT to start inspecting these bridges as well. But it never got anywhere as far as I'm aware of.
Okay.
Well, and I think that I love this discussion. I think that this is a very valid point. And I think for the purposes of this document, raising that point and kind of putting in there, inspections should be done annually or, every 2 years or 5 years or whatever the recommendation is, so that as towns decide to construct bridges and pedestrian bridges, they know what that maintenance cost is, and whether it's borne by the state, which I don't think that it will be. Municipalities know what they're going to need and how they're going to have to implement that. And maybe is there, some guidance as to kind of to your point, it might be cheaper to build now, but longer, or more expensive to maintain. Are there some best management practices of different materials that are used that might be a little more expensive, but the maintenance or the life expectancy of the materials are longer? So those are things I think that maybe, again, warrant more discussion, but could be part of this document.
If I could just add this is Sal Portia from Waterbury. Our Greenway funding originated, I don't believe we applied for it. It was redirected federal funds. I don't think there was a maintenance plan per se, but like you said, for Tiger, when we did our Tiger grant through FHWA, we had to have a maintenance plan and they had to approve it. And that's something that we're married to now for the Tiger project. And but it wasn't really our main focus. Our main focus honestly was get this thing built and have it out there. And unfortunately, the maintenance issue gets pushed to the side. It has to be dealt with later. So if we can deal with it up front, that would be the way to go.
That is the best solution, is to deal with the maintenance, figure out who's going to take ownership of any maintenance before you decide to build any of it. Because it has to get done, and DOT does not maintain. If they're building, they're not maintaining.
One more thing for the Waterbury Greenway, it was always envisioned that it would not be used during the winter, that we were not going to remove snow. Now, I don't know if that's changed. I understand Aaron's points about people using it in the winter because there's no other alternatives. But our plan was originally not to have it open in the winter.
I think it's probably 80% of the trails out there do not maintain the trails in the winter, at least that I've seen.
Yeah, and I think that if there is a desire to maintain it or to open it in the winter, there needs to be realistic expectations. I don't even know that 48 hours after a storm is realistic. Looking at each town's resources, and they have the roads and they have the sidewalks and they have so many other things. Where does that trail fall into their level of priority? And if we get back-to-back storms, so I think all of that has to be set forth with proper, so people get the right expectation if you decide to open it at all.
They also have legal departments.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, to just clarify, or like, if I understand it correctly, with the bridge maintenance issue, if we write something in the manual and maybe make a recommendation that because the DOT is in the best position to organize maintenance, at a minimum, we should be, maybe if we document that, that'll eventually become legislated. I don't know how the process works, but that at a minimum would adopt the state standards, and then maybe ultimately the state would perform it. I mean, sure, they're not going to be they're not going to want to hear that, but they definitely have the best resources and program. And why have 100 different, or 50 different programs along the path? You should have one uniform program.
Yeah, as we're moving forward with this document, we'll look into that, because it does, as Rissa said, this raises a very important question that I think we hadn't really ever thought about. We always think of pedestrian bike bridges as being kind of, they don't experience the same amount of stresses as a road bridge. We're not having vehicles going across it constantly. We don't have the heavy weight vehicles either. But it doesn't mean we should ignore, their conditions. So we'll look into it and, add that to this document and, see how we can go forward.
Mark, I'll just note to that end, based on information I have, more bridges, just FYI, fail due to scour than fail for structural reasons.
Yeah.
And so you'll have maybe sort of a biennial inspection like you do for roadway bridges potentially. But, in the case of the Steelbrook Greenway, they had a major scour event, and the town had to hire an engineer to come out the next day and take a look and make sure that the abutments were not compromised. It was interesting, actually. The scour event turned up some historic remnants that were in the embankment. So it was an interesting event, but keep in mind, those issues could be non-structural, scour as opposed to structural.
Can you explain what scour is?
Oh, yes. I mean, if we have a bridge with abutments that are found, adjacent to the river's edge, if the river scours due to a major flood event, the abutment could become undermined or, compromised one way or another.
You check, it's like a water flowing underneath the substructure element, removing its foundation. Is it probably the definition of scour?
Okay, well, we had the dam collapse between Shelton and Derby 100 years ago because of poor design of the dam.
I didn't work on that one.
It's been fixed.
All right. We're a little over our agenda times, but maybe we can move on to the next.
Yep.
So rules and regulations, Sal. I think the big thing that has come up in the last few years that are really changing, it's changing the way people think about rules and regulations, at least for permitted uses, are the rise of e-assist vehicles, so e-bikes. I was out on the Derby Greenway and saw this guy out there on, I guess it's called the Hoverboard. So, a few years ago, I think most multi-use trails had a simple no motorized vehicles. But the fact that there's so many of these e-bikes and other modes out there now, sort of blurs that line between, what's a bicycle and what's a motorized bicycle.
So then you just, go ahead, sorry.
No, please.
Then you either have to have an absolute prohibition, say you can't do it because you know what you're gonna get out there.
Right, and well, so.
Right, but then how do you get into enforcement and passing out tickets or whatever?
Right, I think most people, some of the e-bikes now, I think you'd have a really hard time distinguishing from an ordinary bicycle. So that's definitely an enforcement issue. But also, I think, a lot of these bikes are enabling people that would not normally be able to bicycle, letting them, experience these trails. It lets people go longer that are commuting. And, I don't think in most cases they present more of a danger to other users than an ordinary bicycle. So, the state recognizes 3 classes of e-bikes. So class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 1 is pedal assist only up to 20 miles an hour, where the motor shuts off after it reaches 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is a pedal assist, but also has a throttle up to 20 miles an hour. And then class 3 go a lot faster, usually up to about 28 miles an hour or even faster. And they usually have a speedometer. They're a little bit bigger and heavier. Most states that recognize that class system will allow class 1 and class 2 on multi-use trails. It's really up to local jurisdictions though. And most of them do not allow class 3 or above. What that doesn't address is all of those other things. Motorized scooters, hoverboards, there's electric skateboards now, and there's going to be more and more of these things. So, how to deal with that is an issue. The Rails to Trails Conservancy, their recommendations are to sort of regulate based on safety issues. So, does one of these really create more of a safety issue than any other vehicle? And they recommend keeping the trail open for as many users as possible. The other sort of big hot button issues, I guess, are hours of operation. So most trails are open dawn till dusk. That does create an issue for commuters, or even somebody that wants to exercise after work for a major portion of the year. I drive to work in the dark or drive home in the dark. So if people are using the trail to get to work, that could be an issue. Speed is the biggest concern on trails, speed differences. So having a speed limit, most trails, most trails do have a speed limit, although how to enforce that when I've never seen anyone running radar on a trail, and most bicycles don't have speedometers. That can be a problem. And then pets, I think Jack can talk to the pet issue probably better than any of us, but there are certain situations on busy trails where pets may not make sense. So those are all discussed in this draft that we've come up with, and I'd like to hear all of your experiences with any of that or thoughts.
Well, the dog issue has been a big problem with us from the beginning. And I'll take partial blame. I was chairman of Parks and Rec when we did this, and we're trying to decide whether we would allow dogs or not. And I did a lot of research, and believe it or not, at the time it was like 50-50 who allowed it and who didn't. So my feeling was, as you said before, we want everybody to be out there to use the trail, so we allowed it. Turned out to be a big mistake. And they were banned for a while, allowed back on, bags were put on, whatnot. And everyone thinks the biggest issue is poop. It's not. Okay, it's the most visible one, but in a trail like Derby's, safety is a bigger issue. Our trail is only 10 feet wide, and even somebody with a dog on a leash can control the whole trail. And to me, that was always the biggest concern. But after going through it so many years, the city, and no volunteer, the city itself decided to ban them. And Ansonia, which connects to us, I think intentionally allowed dogs because they were not getting any traffic. So they said, why not? So, and it has caused problems. People get to Division Street, which is the street that divides Ansonia and Derby Trail. And on one side you can have a dog, on the other side you can't. But if I had to do all over again, I would have advised from the beginning on our trail. I'm not saying all trails, but our trail where there's not a lot of room. I think banning them was the better idea.
I would agree with the dogs. When I did my research, when I was drafting the rules, it was 50-50. People had dogs, they banned dogs, would allow them. So I came up with, all pets must be on a leash. And then I had and the next level was, keep the leashes short. I've seen them where they actually say, 3 feet, 5 feet to 3 feet, but who would enforce that? Because the problem is leashes with bicycles and, people running, it's problematic.
And I just want to, I agree with that short leash, just on a different perspective. Our Sue Grossman Trail is in a very popular trail, but it's in a very rural area. And a lot of people bring their dogs, especially early morning or late night, because we have a lot of wild animals. We've had bears, coyotes, bobcats, different animals. So people feel safer having their dog to kind of scare off that wild animal encounter that may happen. So we do allow dogs on our trail, but that short leash and on a leash is definitely helps make it safer.
Just for sake of time, sort of moved on to this list. So we sort of spitballed some ideas around the office here. We, looked at a whole bunch of rules and regulations that are posted online for various trails. And we came up with this as just a starting point for a discussion about, coming up with a list of rules that, we think make sense that towns can sort of start with to create their own rules. I don't know if you want to go through these, Rista, or.
Well, I think if everybody can see them and read them, if you have anything just kind of for the sake of time to comment on, please, bring it up. Some of the initial things that I support all of these. The one that I would just question about enforcement is having that speed limit. Never faster than, I think this must travel at a safe speed. How do we enforce 15 miles an hour over something? But I think that's a good baseline to say. So I'm just gonna open it up to anybody. And I do want to say, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, we're gonna kind of put together, Aaron was going to put together kind of all the comments that were said today, kind of this, and we'll send it back out for everybody to continue to add comments offline, directly to Aaron, email, as we move forward with this. And then we'll have a final draft for review. So, if you think of something after this, fine. If you have something you want to discuss in more detail, but don't want to bring it up here, that's great. But for now, I'll stop talking. Let anybody who has a comment on any of these bullet points to bring them up instead of going through each one just for the sake of time.
So this is Edmond speaking, and I'm jumping in here a little late, but I'm rather curious why we're even talking about any kind of motorized vehicle on a walking and hiking trail. It seems counterproductive to me. Maybe there's a large demand, and that's why we're talking about this, and we're finding this to be true in other communities. But it seems to be, motorized vehicles seem to be just in juxtaposition to a walking, bicycling, and hiking trail.
Well, I don't think what the class 1 and class 2 e-bikes are really still, in my view, are still those bikes. You have to be pedaling in order for that e-assist to come on. So you're still pedaling. A lot of times people who are experienced cyclists will go faster than on a regular bike than the e-bikes will even allow. So the e-bikes are expensive, and a lot of people are using them to go longer distance if they're commuting, or to, if they're aging or have an injury or a disability that allows them to get on that trail and continue to cycle. The class 3 bikes, which are the bikes that don't require you to pedal, don't require you to move the bike yourself, are not permitted. So to that point, yeah, electrical vehicles that are just purely the mopeds, those type of things would not be allowed. But those bikes that are traditional, get on, pedal, make the bike move, but then will assist you either up hills or to go further, or if you are struggling in some way, kind of just help keep you on that trail and moving are the ones that are the class 1 and class 2 bikes that do that for you. So I think that's what we're talking about. There's been a lot of studies out there on these e-bikes, and one of the ones I read was they planted some e-bikes on the trails, and then they asked users, they did a survey of users, you know, how was your experience on the trail? Did you even know there was an e-bike? And the majority of users weren't even aware that there was an e-bike on the trail with them. And I think the reason this is even part of this conversation is because there's some legislation out there about it, and we want to make sure that we have clear rules, that we don't want those fully motorized and not just the e-assist type of bikes on there. I don't know if that helps clarify it for you.
Listen, I get it, because I didn't truly understand class 1, class 2. But with that said as well, here would be the only other issue. And again, I'm just throwing this stuff out here because we are spitballing. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I don't know that. How does it become enforceable? Just like the speed limit, how does it become enforceable? And what I found is when you open the door for something with the public, they don't necessarily abide by it to the letter. So when you start saying, okay, we're going to allow these kinds of bikes or any kind of motorized piece of equipment onto a greenway, well, then does that not open the door for the next person who comes along with something that it's not a class 1 or a class 2, but it's like, well, I saw that you allowed these, I thought I could too, you know, and therein lies the problem, I guess. I'm not I guess. I think a lot of things simply need to be black or white. And even the enforcement of not allowing any kind of motorized vehicle on a greenway is going to be difficult enough. But if it's black or white, you have a better chance of people understanding what is legit and what is not. When you create gray areas, you're opening yourself up to confusion. I'll say no more. And again, I go either way here. We don't even have a greenway in Thomaston at this point, but at some future point we will. And what applies elsewhere will apply here also. Just some food for thought. I don't necessarily stand in opposition. I did not truly understand class 1, class 2 e-bikes, do now. But again, I think gray areas create confusion.
I'll just agree on the enforcement thing, you know. I've come to view these as not necessarily rules, but more guidelines, because there's really no enforcement. I don't think anyone's ever been given a ticket on the Derby Greenway, and I've certainly seen a lot of behavior out there that breaks every rule that you could possibly think of. But you know, enforcement is a tricky issue. The best enforcement you have is good, heavy use of the trail by people who are concerned about following the rules. They're your best enforcement right now.
True, Jack, and then what you would be inclined to get would be a lot of complaints to the local authorities that this is happening and it's a violation. It just, I don't know, it just opens a can of worms, I guess. And I can see all perspectives here. I get it. And again, I'm not trying to be closed-minded. I'm just, when I read things like this, I guess maybe in many cases I see the worst nature of people because I've seen it numerous times in my life.
Totally agree.
And maybe one suggestion would be to define for the public what class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes are, because also I didn't know what they were. I bet you 90% or more of the population doesn't know. So when you put a sign out there, you can use only class 1 and 2. Maybe if you had a graphic or description of what those bikes are, would at least help a little bit.
Yeah, I think the terminology is definitely still evolving. I think most manufacturers are starting to follow this class system right now. So, you know, newer e-bikes are actually labeled. And I'll just say, you know, it might not be an issue right now on shorter sections in Naugatuck River Greenway, but if you go out on the Airline Trail or the Farmington Canal Trail, there are a lot of e-bikes out there right now. And, you know, I think because they're longer distance trails, People that may not have been able to use a longer distance trail can with an e-bike. So
Aaron, are we going to be putting speed bumps on these things now? Sorry, from my DPW perspective.
No, I mean, and I think I think you have to leave, if you're going to enforce these rules, I think you need to leave some room for judgment on behalf of whoever's doing the enforcement. And I think that's why it's important to say, must travel at a safe speed. 15 miles an hour is not a safe speed, on a crowded trail.
Right.
It might be fine when nobody else is on the trail. It might be fine to go 15 miles an hour, but just like 75 is or 65 on the highway is is the upper speed limit. So I don't know. And like Rista said, we're gonna put all your comments that we heard today and anything else you guys send me into a draft document, send it around to everyone to review, ask for comments, and hopefully at the next meeting we'll have a final draft to review and hopefully endorse, if that all makes sense.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And just, to Ed's point, I just want to just reiterate that again, these, they're not binding on any municipality. Each municipality can adopt their own rules. And I think the idea of this is say, okay, here are the general rules, and either, in the user's perspective, identify which towns are different so they will know. Because there may be towns that have very strong feelings about some of this bathrooms or amenities or e-bikes or, width. So just to kind of let the user know that this section of trail may have different rules, but here's the general rule across the board. So it's not binding on any municipality, and this is just a guideline and a starting point, so that we can start thinking of it as a linear trail, really from a user perspective and not from a municipal regulatory perspective.
Rich, I appreciate that. I think uniformity is key.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on, and I will go through the next couple of slides. Aaron, do you want to give a quick update on some of the projects?
I think if we do sort of a roundtable, I know I've seen an awful lot of work out in Waterbury. I was up there earlier this week and took the pictures up at the top. Pretty exciting. Judy and Sal, I don't know if you want to give an update.
Yeah, well, we're about 52% through our project. Of note, we have a brand new pedestrian bridge. So that was a good conversation this morning. They're starting to work on the roadway with the roadway path, and we're pretty much on schedule. We're doing well. Sal, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Judy covered it. And again, says there's a lot going on. It's pretty exciting. Getting a little more snow than we anticipated, but we're still on schedule.
I don't see Sheila from Ansonia, but is there an update on Ansonia?
So
The new section is pretty much done. I've been out on it. I'm still waiting for the lighthouse to appear that they're gonna have, but they haven't had an official opening though, so might be an opportunity for us to talk about openings this year.
I'm not sure Sheila or Mark Jewell were able to call in this morning. This is Josh Iannotti.
Oh, Josh, you froze.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Josh, can you give a update on the routing study?
Can you all hear me okay?
Now we can.
Okay, I turned off my video. Maybe it's a bandwidth issue. I know that section is substantially complete. That's the latest I've heard from Mark Jewell. For the routing study, we're working on planning stakeholder meetings, scheduling stakeholder meetings, and a public information meeting with the city. We've come up with our evaluation criteria matrix that's been drafted and reviewed with the city. And our draft alignments have also been reviewed with the city. So we've received their feedback. We're making a few tweaks, but certainly looking forward to getting in front of the public here in the near future and sitting down with some of the local stakeholders, some of the local property owners before we do that.
Derby.
Yeah, I guess I'll give a quick update. For the next two projects. The Derby Shelton Bridge is under construction. That's they started on the north parapet wall. The big issue there is getting all the utilities relocated and reset before they can really start doing a lot of the construction. We are working with DOT in the city on there's that little slip ramp that goes from the bridge down to Canal Street. We're trying to add in some landscaping features so that it just won't be hardscape. They'll actually have some soft material there to make the connection down to the Shelton River Walk. So, it's a 2.5-year project. So it's like once it's done, it will have a good connection to the Waterbury Greenway and go across the river and connect into Shelton. The Route 34 project has been awarded. There's going to be a pre-construction meeting of February 17th or something. And that's when they're going to, the contractor gets together with all the state people. We're going to be inspecting and overseeing the project. ETA for starting construction is April 1st. The big deal with that's going to be the again, utility relocation. So, that's going to make, we didn't get a bike path along Main Street there, but the sidewalks will be widened and, decorative lighting installed and make a really nice connection over to the train station. And which, just mentioned that as well. I'm sure everybody's maybe aware of it, but the state did apply for a federal RAISE grant, which is pretty much the successor of the Tiger and the Build programs. So the Derby Shelton train station is going to be renovated and that whole area is sort of re-landscaped. And one of the elements included in that project is just maintaining or providing better pedestrian and bicycle connections from the train station area to the downtown Derby area as well as to the Greenway. So that's probably it's probably going to be about 2 years before we see any construction actually started on that, because they have about 2 years worth of design and environmental assessment work.
Thanks, Mark.
I can give a quick update on the.
Hey, Aaron.
Yes.
Since Mark was just talking about the Shelton Derby Bridge, mind if I just chime in about Shelton a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, so the Housatonic River Walk has been developed in a couple different areas, primarily near Veterans Memorial Park, and then again behind Avalon's apartment building and alongside the Birmingham condominiums. The Riverwalk construction has always kind of been tied to the redevelopment of the brownfields along Canal Street. The city of Shelton has, I believe, agreed to sell 4 parcels of land between the Shelton Derby Bridge and the Housatonic Riverwalk, or Veterans Memorial Park, I should say. So the redevelopment or the extension of the Riverwalk will be done in conjunction with the redevelopment of that property. That redevelopment will be the responsibility of the developer. We anticipate planning and zoning to approve the redevelopment of that parcel of land sometime in 2022. It's quite possible that they start construction in 2022, but given how slowly things tend to move, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 2023. But then you're probably looking at a year-long construction activity. So that one section, wouldn't be surprised if it was completed about the same time as the reconstruction of the Shelton Derby Bridge. On the north end of Canal Street, across the bridge, we have 6 parcels that are slated for redevelopment. And on 4 of those parcels, we've already identified developers interested in developing it, redeveloping those properties. And again, the developers will be responsible for extending the river walk in accordance with the city's design patterns, you know, with the brick pavers. So I think in about two, maybe 36 months, that entire section is likely to be completed. And so we're actually seeing some movement on that end anyways.
Are those all residential developments?
Yes, they're all residential developments. No, I'm sorry, no. Don't know even why I just said, yeah, sure, just to be, you know, the section adjacent to the Veterans Memorial Park is a mixed use property. I believe it's going to be a catering hall. It will have some limited first floor retail uses, and then 3 stories of residential above. And everything north of the Shelton Derby Bridge will be all residential. And I know I haven't spoken to you specifically about this, but at the very northern end of Canal Street, the city of Shelton is beginning to assess the opportunity to do a planning program for the redevelopment of the existing canal and the historic preservation of the Shelton Canal Lock. We're interviewing engineers right now as we speak, and hopefully in the next month or so, we'll have an engineer on board to start that planning process. So that'll extend, you know, the usable, walkable area by another, you know, 2,000 linear feet or so.
Very exciting. So onto the Oxford Route 67 alternative transportation plan. We concluded the study that we worked on with the town. It looked at transit and bike and ped improvements along Route 67 through Oxford. It recommended a 6.5 mile multi-use trail along the roadway connecting the Larkin State Bridle Trail in Southford to the Naugatuck River Greenway, eventually through Seymour on the sidewalk network. We presented it yesterday to the Main Street Committee in town, and we'll be presenting it next week to the Board of Selectmen. And it's all on our website if anybody's interested in taking a look at that.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Anybody else have an update? All right.
Yes, Paul Benevich for Watertown. The design of our 2.4 miles of the Greenway continues. I've been encouraged in the fact that we seem to be able to meet ADA standards throughout without excessive cutting or filling. And it's going to take a while to do all this design, but it's well underway.
Paul, to that end, we had submitted an application to DEP under the Rec Trails program, and I don't know, we might have had some unofficial word, but I'm not sure Aaron, if you've had official word on whether the
Rista might be able to speak to that better than I can. I know sort of initial letters went out a few weeks ago asking for more information on those that were selected. I know we didn't get one of those letters for the project that we submitted for Waterbury, but
Yeah, I'll go into some of that during the funding piece of this conversation. I have some comments on that.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question regarding that piece, that is the Watertown piece. I know we have submitted a LOTSIP grant, is that correct, for the trails construction? Does that include the bridge to cross Branch Brook?
No, what the Watertown section is just for Watertown. We're trying to placate the DOT's concern about the water main by doing the design in Watertown, because again, they're not funding your project until they have assurances that the construction in Watertown won't have an impact on the water main, because your project will have the bridge.
Well, in actuality, the actual lines of property, let's say demarcation lines between Thomaston and Watertown, do extend over the brook into what we commonly thought was Thomaston.
I know we found that out when we were doing that design, but under the state funding we've requested, the bridge is included in that grant. So the state, lots of money would provide construction of your trail section as well as the new bridge.
Okay, I get that. So that'll be a future request is what you're telling me.
Yeah, well, we're just trying to get DOT to approve your project, but they've been very reluctant to do that because of the water main issue in Watertown. And Tony and Paul have been trying to work with the water department in Waterbury to try to assure the department that it can be built without impacting the water main at all. And we're still a little bit in a holding pattern, unfortunately. We had expected your project to go 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Well, we had it all in place 3 years ago, but that's neither here nor there. And it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense without that bridge over Branch Brook in the Watertown section.
Correct.
I think it's all contingent, because then we actually would have a walkable and rideable piece that makes some sense for everybody to build off of. For Waterbury to connect to and for Thomaston to create further. I think that's very much a linchpin for any section in Thomaston. So at any rate, I just thought it might have been in our best interest to incorporate it all, Mark, as one request for LOTSIP, so as not to have to go back after we get one, to move the project.
And that could be a possibility because Watertown did submit an application for LOTSIP as well. Again, once we can address the issue of the water main, it could be very well possible that we do have one contract, to do that whole section at once, and be a lot easier and probably more cost effective. You have one contractor working on the whole piece, just one contract as opposed to two, one inspection as opposed to two. So yeah, that is a strong possibility.
I get it. Your point is we got to get past the water main issue first.
Yep.
Okay. I don't mean to dominate this conversation. We'll move on real quickly, but this is how I get updated. My understanding was that the city of Waterbury Water Department was receptive to the idea. So it's just the state that's having the problem with it. Well, gee, surprise, surprise. Okay, I'll say no more. I'll say no more. Thank you.
Mark, I'll just add to sort of close the loop on that yes, we've had very encouraging dialogue. And in fact, we had a letter of support from the Water Bureau or the Water Department that was bound into our grant request. If we do not get the grant for design, then the town of Watertown, Paul needs to figure out, how to move forward with this dialogue on the water main and with the railroad, so that we can, sort of convince the folks at the DOT that all the issues are resolvable. And so let's just, I guess, see whether or not the grant, if that's dead right now, or if it's still a possibility, and then, we'll just have to figure a new direction forward.
Gentlemen, this is Sal from Porzio from Waterbury. I'd like to talk to the people involved from Watertown, because we've done some changes lately to what is in the feasibility study for what I'm calling phase 3, the part of that goes through the Wick property. And there's been some developments there, and I'd like to talk to you about where we'd like to see Waterbury and Watertown's trail connect. The feasibility study actually has 2 options. One they show is the Watertown version, and kind of one they show is the favored one for Waterbury, but they're 2 different locations, slightly different. So I'd like to talk about that at some point.
So the town would love to have that conversation. Give a date, you bring the coffee, and
Don't forget the donuts.
the donuts, Paul. Right.
Yep.
I'll have Judy work on that. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
We're happy to host that meeting too. We'll get some Brooklyn baking donuts for you.
I'll call salespeople for everybody and get that all set up.
Thank you.
If Brooklyn Bakery Donuts don't facilitate the discussion, nothing will.
Very true.
Get me out on that trail.
I can take this one. Just real quickly, Aaron wanted me to just do a quick update on a application that was recently submitted to Department of Economic and Community Development under their Communities Challenge grant program. It was technically submitted by the Naugatuck+Valley Regional Development Corporation, but the idea is we're looking at that piece of property that borders between Seymour and Beacon Falls that Haynes Development owns, and they've had sort of plans for a number of years to redevelop or develop that area for residential and commercial and a mixed use development, similar to what they did in Quarry Walk in Oxford. And so we sort of facilitated everybody getting together and putting together the application. And this is sort of the outline of the property. And as part of this project, the section of the Greenway that would run between downtown Seymour and downtown Beacon Falls would be built as part of that. So if this grant actually gets approved by DECD, we can see a 2.2 mile section of the trail built in the coming years. So it's an exciting project, and we're really kind of hopeful that it will go forward. It really is a kind of a win-win. Haynes is committed to putting in, doing a $200 to $500 million development. We'd be building a new connector road between 42 and 67. The section of the Greenway would be built. And we're also looking at the possibility of relocating the Seymour train station to the site so it can really become a true transit-oriented development. And as part of that, the existing Beacon Falls station would be closed and the existing Seymour station would be closed, and there would be one stop right, in the middle here. And then the Greenway would provide, the sort of a pedestrian connection and a bike connection between the 2 downtowns. So we'll keep you posted. I think it's a very exciting project, and we'll see what happens. They're supposed to be making decisions in the next couple of months, so we'll keep you updated.
Great. All right, funding opportunities. So I did just want to touch base, because I know a lot of people did submit proposals under the Rec Trails grant. I think what most of you know that I'm also on the Connecticut Greenways committee. I'm the vice chair of that group and part of the review committee of all these applications. This will be my 3rd or 4th year reviewing applications, and we have $3 million worth of grants. there were 65 applications, a record number of applications submitted to this program, and $22 million worth of requests. So traditionally that we have the scoring and then kind of the ranking. We kind of look at how did things score, and then where do they rank as far as the allowable funding and different trail types. And in this round, we really only looked at applications that scored high. There were so many applications that scored medium and even low that are state important, locally important, significant applications that we just didn't have enough funding to pass around. So the award letters are going out. The good news is Watertown ranked high. The bad news is they didn't make the first cut of funding. There is some possibility, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up too high, but there were a couple of state projects that did receive funding. And if additional funding sources are able to cover these projects, more of the projects, including Watertown's, would then become eligible. But at this point, they did not make the cut. And I bring this up for two reasons. One, it was an incredibly hard and tedious process. Anna sat with me through it. I think we had 8 to 10 hours of reviewing these applications and discussion and how to do this. And with just that overwhelming amount of applications and requests, it became very difficult. But it also really opened up the conversation for, there's a lot of need out there, and how can we, work within DEEP and DOT and DECD to advocate for these types of projects and support them. So be on the lookout for some of those things in the future. Maintenance was a huge part of this. With this kind of demand, we really can't fund maintenance projects, and we want to make sure that they're maintained. So as I was talking about before, making sure that your communities can score high and have those maintenance plans, and every point is really counting with these programs, because there is so much demand right now out there. And we can anticipate that all of these projects will be applying for a lot of other funding opportunities that are out there. So just kind of keep that in mind, and we'll hopefully have another Rec Trails program, but in the near future, but I don't know what the funding level will be for that. And then I just wanted there's a list here, but Anna, did you have any updates you wanted to talk about here from DOT funding?
Just that, I don't know if everyone knows, but the new round of community connectivity grants were awarded to 17 communities. And we are working on another grant program. It will be modeled after the TA program and similar to community connectivity for rural communities. Trails will be allowed to be funded under that program. It is $5 million a year for 3 years. We're working right now on the specifics of that program. Again, it will be modeled after the TA program and community connectivity, with the COGS having a first review of the applications, and then it will come to DOT for further review and funding.
A question, is that any rural community, or is it rural regions?
Rural communities, rural towns.
Okay, so, Naugatuck Valley, we have Bethlehem and Woodbury and Middlebury are rural towns. So they would be eligible under this?
Yes.
Okay.
Every town will be eligible, but there will be more points given to a rural town.
Okay.
And if you don't mind, when you say that that's modeled after TA, does that mean it's sort of an 80-20? Is there a cost sharing component? Or too early to tell?
It's too early to tell, because it's between TA and community connectivity, where there's no funding for design. It's construction funds only, but not sure if there's any match associated with it.
And Rista, if I can just sort of, again, Aaron put the infrastructure law, because I just wanted to, again, highlight that because the TA program probably had the most amount of change in any of the existing federal aid programs. Because right now, the way the TA money gets sub-allocated, from the state, it's 50% to urban areas, 50% to anywhere. That increased to 59%. So it's, so the urban areas are getting more. Also what the big change for our region anyhow is that the smaller urbans are now eligible entities. Previously, we had to sort of recommend or suggest things to the DOT, but they got the ultimate say on how the money, what projects got selected. Under the new law, small urban areas get to choose, so we don't have to. We spend our money the way we choose. Then the other big thing is just the amount of funding has greatly increased. It increased 71% over the FAST Act, where the other federal aid programs went up maybe 25 to 30%. So we need to work with the DOT to figure out how the program is going to be rolled out. But that's something that I think we have a real chance in the next 5 years to sort of, maybe, get some of these projects built.
Great. Are there any questions on any of these funding opportunities, or does anybody have any others that they're aware of?
Hey, can I ask a question? For Naugatuck, we filled out a form last fall for Senator Murphy congressionally directed spending request.
Yeah, that didn't make it into that didn't make it into the infrastructure law. So
Okay.
They are. You never know that they could be brought up again this year, but yeah, they didn't. Again, it was sort of bringing back the high priority program or earmarks, and that wasn't included in the final bill that was passed. So yeah, it's right now. It's we didn't go anywhere.
Well, if at first we don't succeed, we try
That's right.
again. Thank you.
Well, and again, that project you're talking about, the borough has already submitted a TA project for that. That was the region's #1 priority. And again, this is sort of, our issue. That was our #1 priority, but DOT chose to award the TA money from, for 22 to, Watertown's happy because it went to the Steel Brook Greenway. But, from the region's perspective, the Naugatuck section was ranked higher. So going forward, we hope to have a little bit better say in what projects get selected.
Great. So I just want to be conscious of the time. I know we're running a little bit over time. I think, Aaron, can we table the membership and attendance conversation?
Yep.
And then if you want to give a quick update on the Kinneytown Dam or the NVCOG, NV Vision Conference, we can kind of give a quick update and then adjourn to our next meeting.
Sure. So Kinneytown Dam, FERC has ruled that that the dam operators is not in compliance with their license, and we're working with the agencies to make sure that they either get into compliance or have a discussion with us at the very least. I put a link in the calendar event to the story map that I just updated last night that has all of the most recent information in there. So check it out if you're interested. I wanted to mention our regional conference, which was originally scheduled for March, but we've pushed back to the fall, where we're going to be talking about all sorts of planning issues in the region. But one of the things that you might all be interested in is we're developing a short video about economic impacts of trails in general. We're going to be focusing a little bit on the Naugatuck River Greenway. We've asked some partners to sit and talk with us about their trail. We talked to Mayor Hess last week. We're gonna be talking to Rista. We talked to Jack. If anybody has any stories to tell or want to be a part of that, reach out and let me know. We're also gonna be talking to folks in the Farmington River, on the Farmington River Trail, where they've really incorporated the trail into their downtown development in Collinsville. So something to look forward to, and we'll be sharing. Hopefully, we'll have something to share with you at the next meeting. Maybe a really rough draft of it. So it's kind of exciting. And that's really all I have.
Well, thank you. This is one of the, been a very productive meeting. I think there's a lot of good conversation and back and forth. And I really just want to thank you all for your participation. And, if you have any other comments or questions or things that pop into your head at 2 a.m. like they do to me about this, feel free to email Aaron and let him know any comments or thoughts about the maintenance document that we're preparing. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.